Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. Every now and then when I do these shows, I come across an area, a topic, a subject area that I really know nothing about. Okay, so my kids, grown up, left home a long time ago, but for many years we'd get them up in the morning, make them have their breakfast, clean your teeth, put your school uniform on, have your bags, if you've got your shoes, if you've got your trainers for the thing, if you've got your sports kit, and then they'd walk out of the house, literally 10 meters, and they'd wait on the road, and a school bus would turn up and take them to school. And then at 3:30, 4 o'clock, we'd hear the school bus come back, and they'd come back from school. And we did that for years, and that was just normal. And all the kids around here did the same thing. They would wait, and we're in a rural area, so there'll be little crowds of kids on corners in each village waiting for the school bus. Ours were exactly the same. I then did a bit of research. I'll get to the point in a minute, but I did a bit of research. In the United Kingdom, all children between the ages of 5 and 16 years old are qualified for free school transport if they live more than 2 miles from a school. So this is, and if they're children under 8 years, it can be 3 miles, if they live 3 miles from a school, 8 years and older, from the nearest school. I can't even remember. Anyway, if you live a certain amount of miles from a school, you can use a school bus, if that's the only school around. So this doesn't really affect urban children. This is children who've grown up in rural areas in the UK. The same applies all over the world. So I did research on school buses all over the world. And there's all sorts of different schemes and different systems. Now, obviously, the bus that picked up my kids was a diesel bus, still is a diesel bus, as I mentioned in the podcast. And it doesn't need to be, and it's such a shame. And there's a really good reason behind this. So one of the things I learned a few years ago was that there are moves afoot in the United States. This is not new. This has been going on for a while, to electrify their huge fleet of school buses, because there's a lot of school buses. You'll discover how many in the United States. And I've stayed with friends in New York State and watched their kids go off to school on the big yellow school bus. We've all seen them in movies, these really long buses. They can carry a hell of a lot of kids. And they've always traditionally been diesel buses. And now more and more of them are electric. And once they're electric, they suddenly have more than one role. A school bus, what's its role? Its role is to take children to school and pick them up after school and take them home. That's what it does. What does it do the rest of the time? All these thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of diesel buses, what do? They sit in the parking lot doing nada, zilch, nothing. They're useless big hunks of expensive metal with filthy fuel in them. What does an electric school bus do when it's not moving children around? That is what we're here to find out. So I am very pleased to be able to talk to Gagan Dhillon, who runs a company called Synop, which is a software company that manages the charging for these school buses. Because they're anyone who watches or listens to this show is aware, we're talking an electric bus, big battery, electric motor, off it goes. That is we can take that for granted now. That's technology that is proven to work. But when it's slightly different from a private car, because you're not going to have one school bus in the district. You're going to have hundreds, then soon, often thousands. So how do you charge and manage the charge of those buses? What do you do with the electricity in those batteries, and they're big batteries, when the bus doesn't need to go anywhere because it's not school hours, it's in the night. It's after school, say, or early in the morning. What can you do with that? And that's what I was really keen to talk to Gagan about. So we're talking school buses, but it's really fascinating. And please enjoy this episode of the Fully Charged podcast, and please welcome onto its ample shores, Gagan Dhillon. Gagan, thank you so much for joining us today. And this is a topic that I've been really intrigued and fascinated by long before you got in touch, because as soon as I saw an article about I think this was a few years ago, an American school bus, the classic yellow school bus that was converted to electric, had a battery installed, and I think it was somewhere in sort of northeastern USA. It was like Vermont or New York State. I can't remember where it was. It was up that in that direction. I just went, oh, that's brilliant, because I had spent time staying with old friends with their kids in upstate New York, and every morning I'd help get the kids ready for school, and then they'd run out and get in the school bus. So I'd see, and it was, for me, it was like, oh my God, that's a proper school bus like in the movies.
Yep.
But I was really intrigued then, because you don't need to know a lot about transport logistics or anything to know that a school bus, specifically in particular, is very busy first thing in the morning and very busy in the afternoon. And the rest of the time, it does nothing. And I kind of clicked it. And so when I heard about what you were doing, it just went, I really want to find out more about this. So, I mean, do you know, can you put in perspective the reason that the buses are peculiar in the United States, because they're run by the federal government rather than states? Is that correct?
I mean, yeah. So it really depends on the school district, right?
Right.
In the state, there are some school districts where the bus is a service that's provided by the county, which is
Right. Okay.
which has jurisdiction by the local government. And in some schools, they run their own fleet, but again, public schools in the U.S. are funded through public programs, and so in essence, they are being supported by the government. And that's also why I think we're seeing a lot of government-led incentives across the United States to go from these these big noisy diesel buses to these very quiet, comfortable electric buses. That programs like the IRA and the EPA funding, led by government initiatives, are definitely lending a hand to that.
Right. And I mean, I did a little bit of research because I just wanted to put into context for us here in the UK and other countries around the world just how many there are. So the estimate is, from what I can work out, it's just short of 500,000. It's 480,000 school buses in the USA. Now, I don't know whether that encompasses all the variations of different buses, but that's what I looked up. And they move approximately 26 million students each year. So it's quite, basically, we don't need to know exact numbers, but there's quite a lot of them. That's the key point.
Yeah, there's
hundreds of thousands of them.
There's close to 500,000 of them, as you said, and they range in the size from like the small van to the big 90-foot long school bus that can fit 50, 60 kids into it. So I mean, they are a pinnacle, like a feature of just American culture, that big yellow school bus, right? So everyone remembers growing up in the US, seeing that, getting picked up in it. So they're woven into the fabric here.
Yeah. So the other one I looked up, which I also don't know how accurate that is, but there are currently, because there's been 300 already this year, new ones, but there are 5,982 electric school buses, in use. So does that sound roughly accurate?
That number sounds accurate. I think that number it's hard to quantify, because sometimes that number could be delivered versus in operation. So it really just depends. We've got about 500 electric school buses on our platform today. So that sounds accurate to me. And that number is growing, right? The U.S. expects for all these school buses over the next 10 to 15 years to be fully electric, and that's the target that a lot of school districts and states have.
Right. So I mean, I just wanted to give those rough statistics to give a sort of picture of what's happening. So obviously, it's a minority of buses at the moment are electric, but there is more than one. The point I think I wanted to get across, it's not an experiment where there's 3 electric buses in some district. There's a lot of them all over the place. It's quite a widespread thing. Absolutely. But then can you explain then where Synop comes into this and where you come into this? Because this is what I think is the key thing. And I think the most critical differentiation between combustion transport and electric transport across the board. I mean, not just buses or trucks or cars, but it is a really interesting thing. But also the challenge of charging dozens or even hundreds of buses is clearly it's clearly a challenge. So can
For
you
sure.
explain where you come into this?
Yeah, I mean, so let's start with the problem, right? The problem is that the problem that needs to be solved is it is very easy to take a diesel school bus and have it be filled with gas and do the next run of routes that it needs to do. That getting gas in a car in a bus,
Yeah,
5-10 minutes, right?
yeah,
Pretty simple process. It's a process we've known for since the invention of the automobile, and now what you're doing is you're taking this diesel powered asset, you're putting a big battery in it, just like we have on our phones, and then you're having to plug it into something that's going to take time for it to charge. And so the problem is, how do you continue to make sure that these buses have enough? I'm going to say fuel, even though it's energy,
yeah.
right? How do you make sure they have enough fuel in them to make sure they can do the routes that they need to do and pick the kids up on time every day? Because if they are not picking the kids up on time, they don't have enough energy, then the program just doesn't make sense for anybody, right? So what Synop does is we build software that connects the vehicle to the school bus to a charger and optimizes the charging schedules to ensure that if the bus needs to leave by 9 a.m., the bus is ready to go at 9 a.m. It's got enough charge in it to run the routes it needs to run. It comes back to the school district in the the schoolyard, if you will, and it'll get charged back up, and then it'll be ready to go and pick the kids up and drop them off at home, right? And so you're doing this orchestration in real time every day to ensure that that bus runs the same way a diesel bus would, but it runs a lot cleaner and it runs a lot cheaper because the cost of energy is much lower if maintained and properly executed than the cost of diesel.
Right.
So that's essentially, from 30,000 feet, what our company does. School buses is like the first industry that we had built a business in. Like I said, we've got about 500 plus school buses across 10 different states in the U.S. And we're really excited about where the school bus industry is going because everybody is looking to invest in the electrification of their school buses.
Right, right. I mean, yeah, because generally, then the feedback you've had from the transition to electric has that been positive? Most of the school districts, the teachers, the parents involved in that, are they positive about it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that overwhelmingly, they're positive about it. And as with everything, there's going to be folks that have questions. There's going to be folks that have, their desire to do things the way that they're done, and perhaps do them a little bit differently. And you run into that in this industry as well. But I really think that not only in the U.S. but in Europe as well, regulations are really driving a lot of this adoption,
Right.
and the availability of funds for this adoption is making it a lot, I would say, the transition a lot smoother for these school districts. And the parents, I mean, the parents love it, right? Their kids are getting into these cleaner school buses. They're not
Yeah.
breathing fumes. They're not noisy. The kids love them. The drivers have really good feedback on them. So we're only going to see this continue to expand over time.
Yeah. And I mean that I guess one of the stumbling blocks or one of the barriers is the cost. I mean, presumably the cost of converting. And when we're talking about these buses, we're generally talking about an existing bus that has a conversion done rather than a brand new built as an electric bus. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're talking about from the ground up. These buses are, built without a diesel engine. They're built with a battery pack that's usually
Right.
sits underneath the drivetrain. So, this is an entirely new vehicle that's
Ah,
built from the
okay. I
ground
didn't
up.
know that. Okay. Right.
It's still the same frame and everything, right? But
Yeah.
for the most part, like the legacy automakers like Thomas Built or Lion Electric and others, they're building they're using the same chassis, if you will, but they are essentially
Right.
building a whole new type of vehicle.
Totally. Yeah. So, but I'm assuming then the cost of that is greater than the cost of a new diesel bus, and that's probably a sticking point.
Yeah, the cost is greater. The cost can be $50 to $100,000 greater in some cases.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
But that's also why these government incentives are very, very important, right? The
Yeah.
government incentives are in existence to offset those costs and make sure that this adoption can happen in real time.
Yeah. So then, but because I think one of the fascinating things is, and tell me how if I've got this wrong, but you've got a bus with a big battery that isn't in use for probably, it's like in use more than a private car, but less than probably a city transit bus that's moving people all the time. So it's sitting doing nothing for quite a long time, and that
Yeah.
is where I think I would love to go into the details of the vehicle to load grid X, whatever you want to put it. But is that something that you have built in with your software?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Right.
the view to G, right? That's what we're talking about, is the
Yeah.
vehicle to grid piece. And absolutely, I mean, look, that's probably the most exciting part of it, because if you look at the duty cycle, these buses probably spend 2 hours to 3 hours a day on the road, and then they're sitting the rest of the time,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
And they're
Okay.
sitting as these battery packs, essentially, that have large amounts of battery in them, right? And so local utilities, or the utility in a jurisdiction, might come in and say, hey, we have a requirement for energy, and we need 100 kilowatts of energy sent back to the grid from 6 to 8 p.m. Great.
Right.
So these school buses can then now act as these virtual plants of power, right? Virtual power plants, and dispense that energy back. And so that is software that we have built with partners to ensure that, if a city like Boston, for example, if the city of Boston comes in and says we need X amount of energy for the next week between 6 and 8 p.m., the utility in that city will compensate the buses, the school districts, to send that energy back. And
Right.
so you can see, this new sort of ecosystem starting to be developed through that. And the revenue benefits are really substantial. I mean, there's utilities that are willing to pay up to $12,000 a year for access to energy in those buses. And so those are
Wow.
real business models that can be built. Last year we sent back 30 megawatts of energy to the grid. And if you think about that in a way, that's enough energy to power 2,500 homes for a month, which is a pretty
Right.
substantial number. And we only did that with a small amount of school buses, right? So
Right.
there is a lot of potential in the vehicle to grid space, and it's still being unlocked, right? And I think that's probably one of the most exciting pieces about this industry.
Well, I mean, that is why, if you're doing it with, I believe, around 500 buses, I think that's always the thing. It's like, I can do it from my house here. I have that system built into this house, and I could send some power into the grid. It kind of makes, on a global scale, no difference. It's completely nothing.
Right.
But if there's, 500,000 buses that can do that, that is a huge amount of power that you've got stored there. I'm just thinking in the fullness of time. Once that,
Mhm.
this is really a technology. Once it reaches certain numbers, it has a massive game-changing impact on the way
No,
we.
absolutely. I mean, this is all something that matters with scale, right? Scale is what we really want to care about
Yeah,
on this, right? So you want to go from 500 buses to 1,000, 1,500, a
yeah,
100,000 at some point. So it's going to take time. It's going to be a very gradual upswing, but we do expect that to occur over the next 5 years.
yeah. And then, so the actual charging technology, the hardware that is capable of doing that. So that would have to be. I mean, I think this is the other advantage that school buses have. When they're not in use, they're going to be in a yard, basically, where they're parked all, for the, that was those facilities presumably are already in place, because that's where the diesel buses would have gone when they weren't used.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you've got somewhere that you can build charging infrastructure that is capable of doing the stuff you do.
Yeah, so the charging infrastructure is typically being built, either just in the schoolyard where the school buses are being parked, right? And so, I mean, it's not like we need to build these massive buildings
Right.
and have to have charging infrastructure that comes in there. Charging infrastructure, I mean, if you've seen these chargers, that you can put them in front of a parking
Yeah.
stall, right? And the bus just pulls into the stall, and I mean, they're not taking up a whole bunch of
Yeah.
space, and that's what I think is really interesting in this market, is the school buses and the school districts that operate these buses. They can still go to the same routes. They can still go to the same place they park the bus, and they can still
Right.
get fueled up the way they used to. It's just a lot cleaner, and it's just something that's a lot better for the environment, right?
Yeah.
That is what we think is really going to drive a lot of this.
Yes. And then, I mean, because I don't know how the electricity tariffs work in the United States, but I mean, here we have much cheaper electricity in the middle of the night. to sort of peak times in the day. Is that so? Are there advantages that buses can charge on cheaper rate electricity when there's low demand? Is that something that's possible?
So all of it depends on the local jurisdiction that the bus is operating in, right? If we see more often than not, energy costs more in the afternoon, which makes sense because people are coming
Yeah,
home from work, they're using energy for daily life life chores or whatever they are doing, and so energy certainly does off peak energy typically between 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. every day, right? And
right.
that's when you're going to get that off peak set of energy. And that's when we see a lot of our customers charge. And that's when we also optimize our software with our customers to charge, right? So even if you plug that bus in at, let's say, 5 p.m. at the end of the day, if if we know that you're in a jurisdiction where the energy is going to be much cheaper between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m., we'll make sure the bus charges between those times, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, all of that factors into what's called TCO, total cost of ownership, and you
Yeah.
want to make sure that the total cost of ownership is on par or lower than the total cost of ownership of operating a same diesel asset. So
Yeah.
that's what we're really trying to solve for when it comes to that.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing I think I need to remind our European, particularly UK listeners is uh, generally gasoline and diesel is a lot cheaper in the United States. So if you're managing to get below those prices, you're doing, we have incredibly, I don't even know how much gasoline costs in this country. It's a lot because I don't buy it. But,
Yep. I mean, gasoline here in the U.S., you're looking at, and of course, I think in Europe, it's by the liter. Here right now, per gallon, you're looking at $3.50 a gallon. So yeah,
yeah.
definitely a little bit different.
Yeah. I think if you do the dollars to exchange here, it is more like $10 a gallon in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
it's different.
A
So, but
significant
the
difference.
great thing is if you can run a bus using diesel at that cost and run an electric bus for less, including the total processes that you can do, then that is amazing because it would be very easy to do here. Running an electric,
Okay.
I mean, we have 2,500 electric double-decker red buses in London, and what they're talking about there is just phenomenal uh, fuels cost savings in the operating costs of
No,
those
and
of
that's
those
that's what
buses.
everybody's seeing, right? And it's not just buses, like these semis are starting to become
Yeah,
electrified, right? The delivery vans that come to the door, our
yeah,
door every day, they're starting to become electrified.
yeah,
And I just think we're only scratching the surface of all of
yeah,
this electrification, right? It really started when we as personal users and consumers started to buy these electric cars, right? Like I know Tesla's gotten a lot of bad press lately, but
yeah.
they really like
They opened the door,
made
didn't they? Yeah,
made this shift happen. Yeah, they made the shift
yeah,
happen. It was relatively affordable, and then people started to realize this is actually a much better experience. And then that experience is now shifting into everyday mobility use cases like school buses, the semis that deliver our goods, the delivery vans. So we're just scratching the surface in all of this.
yeah. And I mean, when you started the company, were you like particularly focused on school buses? That was the niche market you saw, or have you? I mean, I just want to know whether you're thinking of sort of expanding into other areas because there's plenty of fleets emerging, aren't there? Electric fleets of various types, as you've just said.
So it's funny when we started this company, I actually had more experience in the world of semis, and I was working
Right.
with Volvo on a number of things, just through my old job, and I didn't know anything about school buses. I knew
Right.
about school buses because I rode in a school bus when
Yeah.
I was in high school, but I didn't know
Yeah.
anything about the school bus industry. And so we were like really focused on the electrification of semis and delivery vehicles, right? Because that's
Right.
where we thought the most natural fit was going to be. But one of our early investors connected me to this company that was electrifying school buses, and just through those learnings, just through months of conversations, we realized this is like a really big opportunity, and this is probably going to happen faster than the semi world or
Yeah.
these delivery vans get electrified because these buses run the same routes. They don't have a lot of state of charge, or they don't have a lot of range requirements because they're typically driving under 100 miles a day.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of government incentives for this to happen, right? And so we started to look really, really heavily into the electrification of school buses, and it became sort of like the first pillar of our business. And as they say, the rest is history. But
Yeah.
yeah, we started, start definitely have learned more about school buses than I ever thought I would need to learn in my life. So it's pretty interesting.
Yes, actually, one of the things I haven't asked, because I asked about the parents and the teachers and the school boards and the local government, but what about, it's been interesting to know what the kids think of them. I mean, they are the ones who are using them effectively. Have you had any feedback from the children who ride them?
So I have not been able to have feedback from the kids, right? For whatever reason, like we just have not been able
Yeah,
to, be in a position where we can talk to the kids or be able to get feedback from them. Like the feedback we have gotten that I think is really important is the drivers, right? And these are the folks
yeah,
that use this day in and day out. They're the ones that, you really have to pay attention to. They really enjoy driving electric
right,
school buses, right?
yeah,
And so I think that has been a really positive sign. We have not, like I said, we have not really seen that across other areas from the kids' standpoint, but
yeah.
drivers like them, transportation directors like them, and you're only seeing more and more of them hit the road. So we think
Yeah.
those are very good signs.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a fairly strong feeling that the kids aren't going to go, oh, I wish we had the noisy, smelly old buses we used to have. I think they're probably quite
Right,
happy.
right. No, I mean, look, I think kids, like, especially when I was a kid, right? You're too young to think about this stuff. You just want to get to school and
Yeah,
see your friends,
you're
right?
not
So I,
bothered.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly.
I don't know how much they're thinking about that.
I mean, what would be great is if to them it's just a bus. It's the school bus. They don't even know. I mean, in a way, I'm waiting for the time when we can go, I've got a car, rather than having to say, I've got an electric car.
Right,
It's
right.
just
No,
a
you don't
car.
have to you don't have to
Yeah,
specify it. It's just, hey, I'm in the car.
yeah,
So, and
yeah,
and it should be easy enough for anybody to recognize that it's an electric car or whatever type of car it is, right? So,
yeah.
um, and I think we'll get there. I mean, I think Europe is actually getting there a lot faster than the U.S., but I do think we will certainly get there.
Yeah, I think now it's kind of generally accepted, well, within the automotive industry in particular, and trucks, that's what's going to happen anyway. I recently test drove the biggest truck that is allowed on European roads, a Mercedes electric truck, a
Okay.
semi in American terms. We call it an articulated lorry in this country.
Which one was
Which
it?
sounds really quaint, but yeah, but it was huge. I mean, and I'm not allowed to drive that size truck on public roads. It was on private roads, but I managed. I mean, it was so easy to drive. I've been in those trucks that have the one I went in as a passenger had 28 gears. So the driver was going through 28 gear shifts to get it up to highway speed. This one has got
Wow.
one gear. It's got forward, stop, and reverse. You know,
Which
it's, it,
uh, which model was it?
But it was a Mercedes. I don't know. It will say in the show. I'll send you a link when the show goes out, and you can see
Okay.
me driving it. Not quite well, except for when I removed a large amount of earth and grass when I did a corner a little bit too. I didn't do it right,
Yeah, those. I
and
mean,
the trailer sort of made it just ploughed a field basically.
when
But I
uh,
yeah.
when are we expecting that video?
Oh, in the next few weeks. No, we
Okay.
shot it a while ago. Yeah. So, but I
Okay.
mean, it was really interesting to be in a vehicle that big with a fully loaded trailer. It wasn't an empty trailer. The trailer weighed, I don't know what, 28 tons or something. It's not as big. I know there are bigger trucks in the United States, but it was 100% electric, battery electric. It had, I don't know what the range was, 350 kilometers, so 200 miles, 200 plus miles, which, and there are roughly 5,000 trucks that size on the roads of Europe now. And I would think 99% of people who go past them don't even notice. Just looks like a truck. It's on the
Right.
highway. It's going along
Right.
full of stuff.
No, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that it is coming very rapidly. But one of the things recently, and I know that was a story that was particularly in the United States, was about cold weather charging. So a lot of stories we saw here of, Tesla superchargers freezing up in Texas or somewhere when it was very cold. And yet we've been to Norway where they have the highest use of electric cars anywhere. They're all fine. But
Yeah,
I just
they're all
wonder
fine.
whether that had been something that affected school buses in the, because some of them are going to be operating in winter with pretty cold winters.
Yeah, some of them are. We have not seen I sometimes I feel like the media sometimes sensationalizes some things, right? When it comes to cold
Yeah,
weather and it comes to these things. Um, I my sense has been that, and we've seen this, right? In We've had customers that operate buses in, so I know for the European audience, like Minnesota, one of the coldest states in the
right,
US, right? It's very long winters. They get temperatures well below 0 degree Fahrenheit, right? And we've seen customers operate buses there just fine. The
right.
secret to that is you have to precondition the vehicles, and that's where software comes in, right? So if
Yeah,
even if the vehicle is plugged in overnight, you want to have that vehicle ready to go by 6 a.m. And
yeah,
so our software sort of wakes the vehicle up gradually from an hour in advance and says, hey, it's time to get going. Like we're gradually waking these vehicles up an hour or two in advance on the day typically. And using that to then make sure you have the state of charge, the battery is warmed up, the vehicle is warmed up, and you can still operate just as you would any other place at any other set of temperature. So,
yeah,
people, I mean, yes, there's stories of vehicles running out of charge because that was too cold and something else was going on with the vehicle or whatever the case is. There are certainly cases of that. It is going to always happen.
yeah,
But if you prepare and you are ready for cold weather environments, which we think software is key to enable that,
yeah.
you can run these vehicles. It doesn't matter if it's 100 degrees or 0
Right.
degrees.
Yeah. Because I mean, the other one is, I'm guessing this, but I mean, I'm assuming it's possible. Is that, for instance, my car in the winter here, I can, if it's plugged in, I can preheat it before I get in it, so it's got no frost on the windows. It's nice and warm inside, and I'm not
Yep.
depleting any battery, any range by having to heat the car up when I get in it. It's already warm.
Yep.
Can you do that with buses as well? Is that because presumably if you're in a really cold environment and they're outside, it'd be nice to defrost them a bit
So that's what we mean by saying, hey,
by
we are
preparing. Right.
by preparing them. It's not like, if do you what electric vehicle do you have?
Well, I have a Tesla Model 3 and an
So
MG
then,
4. Both of
so
them do
it's
it.
it's
Yeah.
not as easy as the Tesla app where you say, "Hey, turn the
Right.
car on," right? And I wish it was that easy. If it gets that
Right.
easy, then it'll be incredible. But it's sort of the same process, right? A little bit of the
Right.
same process, but that's the you know that's where the industry is right now, and the OEMs need to deliver for that to happen, right? Like that's
Yeah.
why everybody says Tesla is a software company versus anything else. They've just
Yes.
nailed how to do this on the software side really, really well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is very true. And with all the recent stories denigrating Tesla, some of them very justifiably, but that I have yet to come across another car that has that detailed level of you know workable, understandable, easy to use software. I mean, it is. They are.
Absolutely.
They did nail it. You're right.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think Elon's built a great business, right? And yes, there are some things that people
Yeah.
perhaps don't agree with Elon on, but we can't argue what you can't argue what he's built.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always want to include in a sense, the people like you, the people who aren't on the TV and on the in the media constantly, who actually built them. I just think it's
Yes.
always important to, you know,
Look, these
there
things are
are
hard.
actual rocket scientists at SpaceX and really brilliant I've met some of the automotive people at Tesla who are extraordinary. And I think they're probably very happy they're not in the press, but they don't get the press coverage, and they've actually built the cars.
No, they build the cars. They build a great product, right? And
Yeah,
and and I think everybody recognizes that. And I think, you know, look, every company faces headwinds, and
yeah,
so and the industry will face headwinds. But I don't think you can argue with the results of what the car does
yeah.
and the entire ecosystem. And that entire ecosystem needs to be shifted into commercial because
Yes,
that's how you really scale a commercial electrification.
yeah. I mean, I also think what you're doing is absolutely central to this whole transition to electric ground transport. In that the the software is critically important, because you can sort of make an electric car work with very basic software, and you've
Yeah.
got a battery and you've got a motor and you have a little control system. You know, it doesn't have to be that flash, but actually to make it a functional vehicle in all the aspects of its possibilities requires amazingly good, well-written software. I think
Yeah. I mean,
I've become very aware of that.
I think it's the software, but I think it's the connection. You have to connect the vehicle, the
Yeah,
charger, and the grid, like the electric grid. You have to connect all that in one place, and that's our goal.
yeah.
And I don't want this to turn into an advertisement for what we're building, right? But
I
that
think
is
you can do a
eventually,
bit. Yeah,
yeah, that is the goal of what we want to build and what
yeah.
we're out to do.
And I mean, so can you give us a sort of vague stats just to kind of give an idea of it, of what? Because I have no idea of like the battery size, or all the conversations around cars around battery size and range and charging speed and all those things. I have no idea with buses. Don't know how big the batteries are. Don't know how fast they charge or discharge. I mean, can you give us some idea of how fast they charge, but also what you can pull from a bus in terms of energy?
Yeah, I mean, so the batteries, right? The batteries do charge at a pretty relative, quick speed. You can go from, these batteries are, I would say you could charge a school bus in about 90 minutes from 20% to 90% state of charge. But it's not the battery that matters, it's the type of charger, right? So we are
Yeah,
using, most of our customers are using DC fast chargers, which
yeah,
have a pretty you know pretty quick state of charge, or pretty quick speed of charging. You
yeah.
can charge up to 180 kilowatts
Right.
on
Okay.
these chargers, and so that's pretty significant. You can charge up to 360 kilowatts on some of these chargers as well. It just
Right.
depends on the type of infrastructure that a partner has set up. So I think that helps with, hey, the vehicle doesn't have to sit overnight for 8 hours and charge, and we don't have to go through this long cumbersome charging process. Like,
Yeah.
that certainly helps with that. And then the other thing that it comes down to, right, is these vehicles have a pretty standard charge curve, right? So they will
Right.
ramp up for up until 80%, and then they'll start to ramp down, and you can still get to that relative state of charge in a pretty quick manner. And then when it comes to dispensing energy, right? I mean, a single vehicle, it can dispense up to 150, 200 kilowatts of energy
Oh,
at a
right.
time.
Okay.
So
Right.
it's a good amount of energy that can certainly be dispensed,
Yeah.
and that's what we're seeing our partners do, and
Right.
that's good. That's pretty good from a dispensement standpoint. I think that the V2G stuff that everybody gets really excited about, it only really matters at scale, right? You have to have hundreds and
Yeah.
thousands of these buses dispensing to actually take a load off the grid, because
Yeah.
everybody always talks about the grid being so constrained and there's so much, pressure on the grid. Well, you have to have hundreds, if not thousands, of these vehicles dispensing energy to have an impact on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, because that's what. Do you know what they're? I guess they're going to be different because they're going to be doing different routes. But what the battery capacity is, I've just got no clue. Is it like hundreds of kilowatt hours, or is it like 150? I don't know. What do you know roughly where it is?
Oh, okay, you're gonna test my knowledge. Give me one
Sorry. Yeah.
second. I want to be super. I want to make sure I am super clear on
You're allowed
this.
to research it.
I just want to make sure I have the right one. So, I mean, you're typically looking at, like, with a battery size of, if I look at just a typical school bus, the big school bus that we think of in the
Yeah.
U.S., right?
The
It's
long
looking
one.
at,
Yeah.
it's got about a 200 kilowatt battery, right? So,
Right. 200 kilowatt
um,
hours. Okay.
yeah, so it's got a
Yeah.
200 kilowatt hour battery, which is sizable, right? And
Yeah.
it can dispense that battery in 30 minutes if it needs
Right.
to for V2G use cases.
Yes. Yeah. So that is, I mean, say it's kind of 3 Tesla Model 3s effectively, isn't it? Roughly.
Yeah,
It's somewhere around
yeah.
that area. So it's much bigger than you'd have in a car, unless you've got a Hummer.
Unless you've got the Hummer EV, yes, absolutely.
In which case,
Which
you can run a
I've
small
actually
city
not,
from your car.
I've not seen many of those.
I've not seen one. No.
No.
But with that, I suppose that's the other thing then, that the software you've developed isn't specifically for buses, though. This is what I think the point I wanted to try and understand. it could be used for any fleet. So if there were 200 vans at an Amazon, distribution center, would your software run their system as well, or it could?
Yeah, we are agnostic to the type of vehicle and use case,
Right.
so we could absolutely do that.
Yeah.
Last mile delivery fleets are, like I said, one of the biggest segments of vehicles that we're working on, and we're excited about. So 100%.
Right. And that's it's a very good business to be in. I think because there's one thing I think we can all see is this. It's up and to the right, isn't it? It is really expanding around the world. I mean, it's a huge change we're seeing all over the place.
Yeah. No, I think that last mile delivery is going to be the biggest segment of electrification.
Yeah.
It's just going to take a little bit of more time. Here in the US, so I'm not sure in the UK what the postal service is, but the USPS, which is the United States Postal Service, has almost 1 million plus vehicles. They're going to electrify all of them, right?
Yeah.
And so those are just like millions of vehicles that are electrified.
Yeah.
Those are the big opportunities we all want to chase.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, have you discussed or thought about, more domestic levels of it? I mean, I would imagine it's such a pain in the ass hassle. It's kind of, but I mean, there's people have tried to do a business model. I have one of the early vehicle to house chargers here that you can do that with. And it's never worked terribly well. I've not used it now. I haven't used it for a long time. My house was an experiment when they put it in.
So I think the vehicle to house, like the consumer side of sending energy back, I think that's still early, right? Like that's the sense that we have is still early. Most people, we use our cars a lot, right? And we want our car ready to go for anything that comes up, right? So it's hard for us to say, okay, I'm going to have my car available to give energy back, right? When I actually need that car and I want to use my car for whatever use cases that I personally have to use that car for.
Yeah.
I think that the V to X stuff will come into play a little bit later on, but you as consumers have to be comfortable with that. And then the consumer has to have an incentive, right? Are they getting compensated for that? Are they saving money on their bill for energy on that? And I think that education is still happening.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's why it makes so much sense. As soon as I read the story about school buses, I went, oh God, I never even thought, it's one of those ones where you went, immediately I read it, I went, of course.
Right.
Because I know very well, like you were a few years ago, I know very, very little about the school bus industry, but you kind of know the basics of it. You don't see school buses driving down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan picking up passengers. They do school kids. That's what they do.
For sure, and that's 100% what they're doing, right? Is they are driving kids to the school districts. They're driving them around, like that is all that they're focused on. And if it gets if it gets to a point where they can go out and drive kids, they can go out, send that energy back to the grid every day. Awesome, that's where we want to get to. And then the next place we want to get to is our personal vehicles doing that too. I drove my car to the mall, came back home overnight, sent energy back, gets charged back programmatically. Yeah. That's where we really want to get to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, presumably the operators, so the people that run the school buses, when they come back to the depot, they plug them in, and then your software takes over and charges it when it's the best time, or discharges it when it's the best time. So, I mean, from a kind of end user point of view, it's not a massive hassle. They're not constantly checking apps and things. They don't have to do that. You're operating that side of it.
No, absolutely. That's 100% the goal. Like, it's programmatic. I don't have to think about it. I don't want to think about it. Let's just charge my vehicle. If I need to send energy back, send the energy back. And then I just want my vehicle ready to go when I need it. That's what matters.
And do you have any figures of kind of how, because there was some stuff in your PR of quite substantial sums that were generated by vehicle to load, by selling powering the batteries back to the grid.
Are you saying from a compensation standpoint what those
Yeah,
figures are?
I mean, just so that, because it wasn't like $10. It was a lot of money. I mean, over a year. I'm
No,
guessing over a year or something. It was.
that was the figure I'd mentioned. It's
Yeah.
up to $12,000 a year for a school bus, right?
For one. Okay. Sorry. That's from one bus.
That's from one
So
bus.
if you've got
that's
100 buses, you're talking big dollars.
Then you're talking big dollars. And that's not the case for every single utility, but there are utilities that are willing to pay that much in energy for them, because that's how important it is for these utilities, right? That's how you see the demand for them. So I think it's very, very, I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's really good. So, I mean, what at the moment then is your focus on just increasing the number of buses and the amount of time and the amount of sort of systems that you can install and run? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, our focus is we want to help accelerate this transition to electrification. It could be school bus, it could be semi, it can be the electric, delivery vans, maybe even smaller assets at some point. But our goal, full stack right now, is to accelerate that transition. So we want to make it easy for you to adopt these vehicles, and we want to make sure the biggest barrier to adoption is a driver showing up and the bus does not have enough energy.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that never happens. That is the number one goal, our number one priority as a company right now.
Right. Yeah, that would be bad PR, as they say.
It would be bad PR. Everyone would get really, really upset about it. So yes, that is 100% the focus and what we're looking to avoid every day.
And so far, have you been successful in avoiding that?
I say this in all truth. We have not had a vehicle run out of state of charge.
Right.
Now, we have had vehicles that have stopped operation for other reasons.
Right.
There's cases where a driver might back into a charger and the charger is not going to work. So, those things happen. Somebody might run over a charge cable because it was improperly stowed away. So there's still operational things that happen. It's not perfect. Yeah, it's not perfect, right? But as far as running out of charge, that is something that has not happened, which we are excited about.
Yeah, which is, I think, an important thing, because that seems to be, a fear amongst people who've never driven an electric car. They imagine they'll drive 100 meters and they'll run out. And you go,
right.
So you'll be okay.
No, you'll be okay. So
yeah.
That's that's what we're focused on, is make sure the driver never runs out of state of charge. Everything else operationally, like, you're just going to have to navigate, right? These things are going to happen from time to time.
Yeah.
And, we have to focus on what we can control, which is the bus can't run out of charge.
Yes. Yeah. Gagan, it's been really good talking to you, and it's been really interesting learning about this. I mean, it's quite a sort of esoteric, from our point of view over here in Europe, it's kind of, oh yeah, those buses, I've seen them in movies. But what is really interesting is it highlights what could happen, and I don't know what could happen. What is happening? That vehicles that we're all used to leaving dormant for huge amounts of time could actually be useful when we're not using them. And I think this is a really good illustration of that.
No, I sincerely appreciate it. And look, in the US, right, this transition is happening. Would love to come to the UK at some point and understand how it's happening. Like I said, my geographical understanding of school buses outside of the US, I need to learn and expand on still. But for now, we're focused on making sure everybody in the US is 100% bought into this electric transition.
There is actually quite a good Wikipedia page about school buses around the world, which I did not expect to find, but I found that this morning.
I've read it. I have read it before.
Oh, you know it?
Yes. Yes.
So I didn't even know. I mean, yeah, because my kids, because we live in a remote area, my kids got on the school bus every morning when they were at school many years ago. And of course, it was a diesel bus, and it still goes past us now, and it's a diesel bus. And I think it's just so stupid, because it doesn't need to be,
No.
One day it won't be. That's for sure.
One day it'll be a lot simpler. 100%.
Yeah.
I agree.
But it's been great talking to you, Gagan. Thank you so much, and good luck with Synop. I hope the company continues to grow, and we'll definitely keep in touch with you. And I would love to one day. Hopefully we'll be in the United States. We can come and I want to see the system in operation effectively. A load of school buses lined up plugged in, doing
Absolutely.
something. Yeah.
Would be happy, would be more than happy to host and show you how it all works. But I sincerely appreciate the time, and this has been a great discussion, and I appreciate you helping get the word out on electrification and everything that all the good it can do in the world. So thank you so much for everything you do as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I really hope you enjoyed that. I really hope you have the opportunity to come to one of our live events. I know that one that's coming up soon is up in Harrogate in the north of England, and after that we're in Vancouver, and after that we're in Farnborough, and after that we're in Sydney, Australia. But I'm going into 2025. But please do keep an eye on that. All the information about all the shows we do is on fullycharged.show. Please do tell your friends about this podcast. Obviously, if you haven't subscribed yet, we would love it if you did, and then you won't miss any of our fabulous episodes. And as always, if you have been, thank you for watching and listening.